There we go. Okay. Yes. So, Parshas Kedoshim, it is one of the most famous Rambans in the Torah at the beginning. We'll see if we can understand it and understand some of the key points that the Ramban is setting out for us, because it's not just that this Ramban is very important, but it also is really a piece in which he provides almost like a philosophical perspective on all the mitzvahs in the Torah. Although it's mainly understood as a particular, his understanding, as we'll see, of what the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tiyu is, it's actually a lot broader than that. And he's using that as a perspective on how to understand generally all the mitzvahs in the Torah. So Ramban says like this. The first thing is on, let's go from the beginning. Al Kol Hadas B'nai Yisrael. Why is it to everyone? Why is it this parsha said to everyone? Kfa Om Rabbeinu, he says the Chazal have already said, Shaparsha Zu Nemar B'Hakel. This parsha was said whilst gathering together all of Klal Yisrael, because the majority of the principles of the Torah are dependent on this parsha. And so they all gathered together, right? Why is it mentioned specifically in Toras Kohanim in Vayikra? It does talk about the Korban Todah, the Thanksgiving Korban. And also mentions the laws, the rules, and the justice that needs to be applied to those who commit the abominations that are mentioned in the previous parsha and all the forbidden relationships. And the reason why these forbidden relationships are part of Parshas Vayikra, Sefer Vayikra, he says, I explained at the beginning of the Sefer, where he explains over there, because the sin of forbidden relationships is called tumah, it causes the removing of the Shekhinah, and also because it's a sin offering to bring if a person commits the b'shogeg. So it belongs within the category of Vayikra, right? The forbidden relationships, right? But the point that Ramban is, so the 2 points he's making. Number one, why are these here? Why is this parsha of Kedoshim here? Because it is, number one, it does refer to Korbanos, and also it refers to the punishments of forbidden relationships, which also has a strong link to the and to Vayikra and why it belongs in Sefer Vayikra, right? That's on the specifics of these points. The point about the this idea, which I think Rashi also brings, a rov gufei Torah tluyin bo, the majority of the rules of the Torah are dependent on it. He's going to expand on that a bit later as well. It's worthwhile noting that not only is Parshas Kedoshim really the center point of Vayikra, it's really in a way the center point of the Torah. Sachs used to make this point. There's a kind of like it's really the midpoint. It's not literally the midpoint in terms of psukim, but it is, if you think about its positioning, right, where this parsha is, right. It's absolutely, it's critical in terms of that. Now the Ramban says, first he quotes Rashi. What does it mean? Kedoshim Tiyu, you should be holy. Have a purushim and aroyos min avera. You should separate from forbidden relationships and sin, etc. Wherever you find restrictions against forbidden relationships, there you find holiness. Loshon Rashi. So Rashi understands that this is a reflection on the on really what it goes previously. In the end of Acharemos, it talks about forbidden relationships, and here it says that's what leads you to Kedusha, to be sanctified in this area. Aval b'Toras Kohanim, but in the Medrash in Toras Kohanim, Reisi Stam Purushim Tiyu. It says in the Medrash, you shall be separate. It doesn't say, what's his Ramban's question? It doesn't say like Rashi, you should separate from forbidden relationships. It just says, be separate. Separate yourself, be Purushim, right? And from this, he's going to learn that it's a much broader application than Rashi understands. Similarly, they taught there in the Medrash and Toras Kohanim. This is a posuk which is at the end of the parsha. You shall be sanctified, or you shall make yourselves holy, and you shall be holy. Ki kodesh oni, for I am holy. Kashem shani kodesh, just like I am holy. Kachatem tiyu kedoshim, so too you shall be holy. Kashem shani porosh, just like I am separate. Kachatem tiyu prushim, so too you should be separate. So what does that mean? According to my understanding, he says, it doesn't mean to separate from forbidden relationships, like Rashi says. This idea of parishus is the idea that's mentioned everywhere in the Gemara, That means to say those who are, or they some have the girsa, the text on she'aleha on it, so others through it. Nikroim Perushim, they're called Perushim. Now, this phrase Perushim you find in the Gemara. The English translation of Perushim is Pharisees. That's not an English word, but it's a Greek or whatever. This word you find in ancient writings. Josephus mentions it, but it really means to those who it's often used as a reference to the Talmidei Chachamim, but really it means those who are separate. That's what it means. And the idea is as follows: Torah tells you certain things are forbidden, relationships, for foods, but there are other things which would seemingly fall under the same heading. The Torah says it's mutter. You have to be discerning. Some relationships are forbidden and some are permitted. Husband and wife is permitted. Wine and meat is allowed. If so, because the Torah says in the same thing, the same idea, the same concepts that the Yetzer Hara can apply itself to, there are certain things you have to be discerning. Some things are allowed, and some things are forbidden. Therefore, it is possible for a person who is deeply steeped in his own physical time and physical desires, right? Can be just it can manifest all his taivas and live in a completely physical world, whether that's in terms of relationship, whether that's in terms of food, right? Through things that are ostensibly permitted. Yeah. All right. Vidabek yirtzoinoi. Vidabek yirtzoinoi. Vidabek yirtzoinoi. We're quite enjoying it. Vidabek yirtzoinoi, and he can speak about how he wants. B'chol ha'nevelos, b'chol ha'nevolos, shelo huzkar isu ze b'Torah. And he can speak about whatever he wants, all things that are inappropriate, all things that are just lowly and unbefitting, but it's not explicit prohibition. V'nei a novel b'rishus HaTorah. This is the famous phrase of the Ramban. It will be a novel b'rishus HaTorah. A novel b'rishus HaTorah is someone who stays within the boundaries of the rules, but acts in a totally inappropriate manner. Right, a person who really acts in a lowly manner, right, but within the strict boundaries. Okay, you understand? You can find all sorts of things. Well, it doesn't say where does it say that it's also. It doesn't say it's also. It doesn't say it explicitly. All sorts of things like that. Therefore, the Torah comes and says, after the Torah spelt out those prohibitions that are completely forbidden, but and commanded in a general sense. Right? So we should separate ourselves even from things that are strictly speaking permitted. Okay. In other words, there's been a specific, the Torah has already spelt out many things in the previous parashas that are forbidden. And now, in a general sense, it's saying, be separate from things that are actually permitted. Person has to restrict, one should restrict within reason. One's relationship with one's wife, according to the halacha, for the purpose of a mitzvah, the kadesh sanctify himself with the wine, hanozir kodesh, like the Torah calls the nozir kodesh. One sanctifies oneself in wine, doesn't go become a drunkard, right? The yizka, in other words, everything has to be in the correct amount, moderation, etc. Yizka rois and iskaros menu, and he should remember the negative things which come from too much wine. But Torah, benoach, or beloit, we both has come to consequences that came as a result of wine. Similarly, one should separate oneself from impurity. Even though Torah doesn't tell us explicitly about this, Chazal say that Prushim are careful with even the clothes of an Am Ha'aretz, an unlettered person, because they treat them as toming. A commissioner Nozir Kodesh. And like the Nozir is called Kodesh, he's careful about not becoming Tommy with a deceased person. And person should also be careful with his speech, not to become, and his mouth, not to become full of too much coarse eating and speaking in a coarse manner as well. Like it says in the pasuk, all speech, all mouth speaking inappropriately with immorality, whatever it is. It's interesting. The word novol or novola is like a nevela, which is a carcass. Yeah, it's unshechted, right? It's something disgusting, basically. And a person should sanctify himself with this until he reaches the level of precious separation from the desires of this world. It was the highest level. Rabbi Chia didn't speak anything that was sticha b'teila, which is unnecessary speech in his old days. This and these type of things, this mitzvah Kedoshim Tzir is coming after specifying all of the sins that are completely forbidden, until it includes within this command hanakius, the yod of v'gufa. It goes so far as to include cleanliness with one's hands and one's body. This pasuk again, the Ramban links the first pasuk of the parasha, or the second, Kedoshim Tiyu, right, to the end of the parasha, because it mentions Kedosh at the end as well. At the end of the parasha, V'skadishtem v'yisem Kedoshim, you should make yourselves holy. And the Chazal learn that V'skadishtem, you should be sanctified. These are the Mayim Rishonim, Netilas Yodayim. V'yisem Kedoshim ilu Mayim Acharonim, and you wash your hands for Mayim Acharonim at the end. Ki Kodesh, for I'm holy, Zesh Shem and Orev. They used to wipe their hands in those days. They used to bring at the end of the meal, anoint themselves with oil. It was all to cleanliness, so clean oneself after the meal. Ki afal pi, because even though she'elu mitzvahs midivreim, even though these are rabbinic mitzvahs, ikar hakosu b'kiyotze b'zeh yaseh, the main point of the posuk in this area, and that's why Chazal understood it, was a reference to Mayim Tilas Yodayim. Tilas Yodayim is a mitzvah drabonon. Why do you mean the Torah? Why is the Torah referring to it? The answer is the thrust of the posuk is to warn us, we should make sure that we are cleaner and more pure and more separate from the general population, who basically debase themselves with things that are superfluous to the necessary and things that are unpleasant and not nice. And therefore he's saying, in other words, he's bringing as a proof the fact that Chazal learn that the word, the posuk, V'skadishtem v'yisem Kedoshim, you shall be holy, refers to Mayim Rishonim and Mayim Acharonim, is a proof for the Rambam. That Chazal also understood, right, that the word Kedusha here is about going above and beyond. Even though there's a rabbinic, there's a mitzvah drabonon to wash Netilas Yodayim, right? But the Torah of V'skadishtem is saying, go further, make yourselves holy, make yourselves separate beyond the letter of the biblical law. What do you want to know?
What I'm asking is, Rashi talks about separation.
Yeah.
Is the Ramban actually just expanding on
No. Rashi doesn't say separation. Rashi says, Prushim inu arroyos.
separating?
So at the beginning of the Ramban, which we saw, the beginning of the Ramban, he says like this. Basically, his machlokus on the technical point with Rashi is that Rashi seems to understand. You see, okay, it starts like this. The Medrash says, what does Kedusha mean? Purushim. No, it's a Medrash. Yeah. So they're both Ramban and Rashi are going off that Medrash. The Medrash says Kedusha means to be separate, right? You know, it's an interesting question because we just take it for granted. Kedusha means holiness. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be holy? When what does it mean to be holy? So the Medrash understands that the concept of Kedusha is linked to being separate, somehow being removed, which makes sense because whenever we describe something as holy, what we're really describing is that it's set aside. And then one of the biggest proofs for that is that the word Kedusha can also be used, is also used in a negative sense. One of the words for a zona is a Kadesha, prostitute, is a Kadesha. Why? It says with Yehuda and Tamar, Kadesha, which is called a Kadesha. Why? Because set aside. Someone who's set aside for a particular purpose, whatever. So it can be used in that's what it means. That's a proof that it means to set aside. It can be for a positive thing. Normally, we refer to kedusha as a positive thing, right? But it can also be used as a negative, right? Beis Hamikdash is called kodesh. It's kedusha. It's set aside. It's apart, right? Everything is set, right? That's how it works. Now, the difference between the Ramban and Rashi is the Rashi understands what is the separation. The separation is from immorality. That's what Kedoshim means. Kedoshim to you. Don't get involved in immorality, which is what the end of Acharimus is. The Ramban, though, says that if you look carefully at the Medrash, it doesn't say Purushim in Ha'aroyos, be separate from in relationships. It just says Purushim to you. Be Purushim in general. Be separate in general. That's what he brought at the beginning. And he brings the Medrash, says, just like I'm separate, so you should be. He understands a more general thing. Now, this is very important to see continue further, because what we've done so far is Ramban sets out, I say, his famous position that a person can live their whole lives not transgressing, yet living a life which is debased within the letter of the law. Right? It's possible to do that, and he says that's what the Torah says not to do. Now, this is the way he explains the derech, the methodology of the Torah in this. This is the way of the Torah to be specific and to generalize in all similar cases. Ramban is now saying, I'm going to prove this concept to you from a number of other areas of the Torah, where the Torah has the specifics, you must not do X, Y, Z, and then wants us to develop a mindset beyond that in the way we behave. So after all the details of things that between people, lo signov, don't steal, velo sigzol, theft, velo sonu, do not overcharge, or sharas horrors, all the things that you're not allowed to do between interpersonal relations. What does the Torah say as a general point? You shall do that which is upright and good. Okay? Shiachnes ba'asei hayosher. It includes in a positive mitzvah being upright. V'hahashvoya. Hashvoya means which means compromise. They explain it here, being the idea of being, being able to make a pashara, a compromise. And anything that goes beyond the strict letter of the law to appease one's friends. Which I will explain, he says, when we get there with the will of Hashem. So it's a beautiful proof, right? The Torah, why does there need to say that it's a pasuk in Devarim, yeah? You shall do that which is upright and good. What is left? What is included in that pasuk that is not included in all the specifics? The whole way through the Torah, it tells us to do the right thing. Don't steal. Don't overcharge. Don't charge interest. All these things. That means being upright. The Torah says, it's beyond. It's above and beyond that. To be upright and good in every respect. Right? Now, and he says, you see the same thing with Shabbos. Osam alochos, right? There's a list of 39 categories of labor that are forbidden on Shabbos, right? Biblically. Belav. Forbidden, right? Isurim. V'hatirachim ba'asei, okay? And the troubling and the troubling yourself ba'asei kloli shenema tishbos, right? And it's basically what it says is there's a general asay, okay? Then that says a general asay which says you shall rest. Right? You see, what I think he means is like this. The Torah says 39 things you can't do on Shabbos. Those are the malachas, right? But then, how are you supposed to live? How are you supposed to conduct yourself? You can still not transgress any of those malachas and not experience Shabbos in what we would call a Shabbostic way. Yeah. It's more than that. No, but it's a little bit different to that, because I know what you mean, because that's more about the Zocher. He's not talking about Zocher so much. It could be he'll get to that, but he's not talking here about Shomer and Zocher. He's talking here about within Shomer. There's two aspects of Shabbos, right? There's the negative and the positive, right? That's separate thing, right? Positive, all the mitzvahs and Kiddush and Hadlakas Neros, all these, he's talking about within the Shomer aspect. That means to say, within the forbidden categories of labor, you could live your whole Shabbos, experience an entire Shabbos where you don't transgress any of them. But you're not being shoves, you're not being shovas, you're not resting in a spiritual sense. And that's why he says, the turochim ba'aseh, turochim like tircha. You're troubling, or do not to trouble yourself on Shabbos to do things that are not in the spirit of Shabbos, on that there's a general positive mitzvah, and I say, tishbos, you shall rest. Interesting how that actually plays out. There is a concept of tircha on Shabbos. There's other things, there's other ways that manifests in halacha, but it's all including tishbos.
In other words, you could be thinking to schlep furniture up and down the stairs.
Correct. I think that's what he means. I think on a basic level, some of these things are actually spelled out in halacha, like like the concept of tircha does manifest itself on Shabbos, and how exactly that a person transgresses that it needs to be understood. It could be another manifestation of this is the category of uvda dechol, which is a weekday activity. There are some things which are not included in the Isurim. And nothing that's a prohibition as such. But it's an uvda dechol. It's kind of as a weekday activity. You don't do it on Shabbos. It's not Shabbos thing. That's an erev halacha, right? Not min HaTorah, but it could be that it comes under this sort of criteria. The Farish Zebez Hashem, he says, I'm going to explain this further. And that which the reason that it says, for I am holy, ani Hashem Elokeichem, Loma means to say, Shanach nizke ledov kaboi, v'yosenu kedoshim. We merit to attach ourselves to Hashem when we are holy. So the Ramban wants to go further and understand that this parsha is a parallel to the Aseres HaDibros, the 10 Commandments. Because this, like when it says, for I am holy, that parallels the first of the Toras HaDibros. Here, there in the Toras HaDibros, it says about kibbud avoim. Here it says moira, fear. You shall protect my Shabbosos. Interesting. Normally we refer to Zachar and Shomer as in the two sets of Aseres HaDibros, right? Zachar is Yom Shabbos, Shomer is Yom Shabbos. The Ramban says actually Shomer is here as well. So it's also the other side of the Aseres HaDibros. This is a parallel to the Aseres HaDibros, almost like the second set of Luchos are Parashas Kedoshim. So for example, you have Ish Kibbud Avoim, but here it's Ish Im Aviv Tiro. You shall fear your parents. Zocher is Yom Shabbos, and here you have Shabbos is like Tishmoru. Correct, Shomer, yeah, God, right? In the second Sabbath, it doesn't say fear of your parents. I don't think. No. Although there is a slight difference. There is a difference in the way around. There. Yeah, so Rashi explains because one is more likely than the other, more usual, yeah. V'omar, and it says, Al tifnu Eloi lilim. Don't turn to Avodah Zarah. If your heart turns, or his heart turns today, he shouldn't turn his heart to Elilim Avodah Zarah lahamin, to believe Shiabam Toeles, that there's some benefit in them, or the future will occur, that they prophesied through which is prophesied through them. There should be nothing in his eyes. So again, Al Tifnu Elilim is a reference also to the Aseres HaDibros, not to worship idols. And the future things will only come only with the decree of Hashem. Basically, you can't even look at them, can't gaze at them, because you don't get involved with them at all. So that's another, if you like, example of Kedoshim almost, because it's saying don't get involved with it at all. I think that's what he's saying. Yes. It says, do not make these molten gods. So you see that from the time you make them, it's forbidden. We have lots of commands about the Torah not to worship idols. The Medrash of Vayikra Rabbah actually spells out how this parsha has every one of the Aseres HaDibros in it. Why is it so significant, this parsha, that all of the Klal Yisrael have to be gathered together? Because all the Aseres HaDibros are inside it. It says, right? I am Hashem your God. Don't make God molten gods. Don't take Hashem's name in vain. Don't swear in my name falsely. Like we said. Do not stand by the blood of your fellow. So again, it's a parallel, right? Do not commit adultery. Has no soul, which is a form of immorality. Do not steal. Bear false witness. And here it talks about rechilas, spreading slander. Do not covet. Shall love your neighbor like yourself. So you see that's all, which is the basically you're not desiring his things. In that way, it's parallel to that. Okay, midrash. That's the midrash. That all of your service has to be towards Hashem. Okay, Omar, it says, "Ki kasher tizbuchu Hashem, lo tizbuchu loy elo l'ritzonchem." When you sacrifice to Hashem, only do it for which there should be l'ritzonchem. That should be something that Hashem desires. It should be something Hashem wants. And should want you like a master servant is desired and wanted by his master. When he does everything that he commands him to do, right? Should we want him to atone for him, and the light of your face when you desire it. And the reason is, you shouldn't think that there's any benefit in Avodah Zarah, don't do it to receive a reward, just to do the rotzen of Hashem, the will of Hashem, because the simple desire to do Hashem's will, that is what is fitting, and that is what should be mechayev us. That's what should drive us. That's what should obligate us. It's interesting the Ramban's emphasis here on and learning it out. It should be liritzonchem. Yeah. Rashi says on that when you shecht it should be on condition that it should be a nachas ruach, appeasing, find favor. That it should be lirotzon for you. That it should be something that makes you desired or wanted. Okay. And he's talking about you shouldn't therefore have a thought of piggle, where it's the wrong time. You think, right? Yeah. But what I think is interesting is because that word liritzonchem, of course, helps us understand why it is that the main bracha in Shemoneh Esrei begins with the word ritzei. Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu. What is the emphasis on ritzei? Right? Why was you understand? Why do we emphasize ritzei when we talk about the restoration of the restoration of the avodah? That's what we're davening for, right? Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu Am Chayzor V'Sfilotzom. It's interesting. This Ramban helps us understand it. Perhaps there's this emphasis on that word ritzei. The key thing is that it should be done with an understanding that what should drive us is the will of Hashem. So that's what we want. That's what we want to do, and therefore Hashem will desire us as a result of that. Very strong emphasis on ritzei. Benching as well. It's there's that word ritzei features very prominently. Yeah, it's the same word, and that's why, again, I think also helps understand why it is, because you could learn this parasha as it's talking about these hugely central features of Avodah Zarah and Shabbos and Kibbud Avoim and everything else, and then it seems to go into quite a specific detail, right, about pigul. Remember Zvachim, Jeremy, we learned Zvachim and pigul. Remember, it was like about months of pigul. Yeah. There's a pigul. There's a lot of halachas about pigul, right? Person who makes a shechs korban and he thinks while he's sheching the korban at the wrong time. But it does seem like a detail. Of course, it's not a detail. Excuse me, mitzvah of the Torah. But according to what the Ramban's explaining, it's critical because it is the central message of how. And that's why perhaps he doesn't say it's clear. That's why I think perhaps he's explaining why this is here. Because what does pigul represent? Pigul is the archetype example of a person doing a korban, not l'rotzo. That means you've got completely the wrong message. You're not davening for the right purpose. You're not doing the korbanos for the right purpose. You're thinking about something else. So it's a message about how what we do and the way we serve Hashem needs to be directed in the right place. It has to be l'rotzen. Hashem should want us, and we should want to do as a result the right thing. Let's just finish it off. Says this about the shlomim. which are the lower level of holiness, which are consumed by their owners themselves. That there it's harder. There are certain things that are kochim kalem, and certain things that are kochi kochim. In a way, the lighter level of holy things, right, is harder to do properly because you're going to have it for dinner. You're going to eat it. The Bailim eat part of the korban. That's harder than an oila. A burnt offering, send it off the base. Something that's the holy people will deal with it. I don't have to worry. You understand? Yeah. This is hard. I've got to take it home and consume it with the right machshava and the right intentions and everything else. But he says how much more so you should do it. You should do it. How much more so you have to treat kodesh kodeshim in that way. Or it refers to the shlomim, or because the shlomim are the measure of Klal Yisrael. Basically, the Bnei Noach do not have the schus of offering shlomim, so it's unique to Klal Yisrael in that way. But Maskil Yovin, those who are intelligent will understand this. Ramban always uses that when he goes into a Kabbalistic idea, effectively. You make sure you do it with the right knowledge. Person who's misasek b'kochim, that means to say he's doing something else at the same time. For example, he's trying to lift up, or he happens by itself. So he lifts up a knife in order he wants to lift up a knife, right, or to throw it, and he shechts the korban without intention, not intending for shchita. That's called misasek, and that is posel, and that's why it has to be, and that's what Chazal understood. It has to be l'ritzonchem. You do it with mindfulness, intentionally. But I think that also ties what he said before. That's the concept of what it means to do something l'rotzon, right? To do it in an appeasing manner. So we only did one Ramban, but it was very important. We did the whole thing. Many people don't learn the whole thing. You learn the beginning part. What? So there we go. So he did the whole thing. Very, very important. It's a massively important Ramban. He's setting out principles, the whole Torah. It's amazing the way he proves it from all different cases, whether it's in monetary law, Shabbos. There's this whole idea of you have the specifics, but then the Torah says, this is the attitude I want you to develop, right? Which is broader than the specifics.
So if he gives a card,
yeah,
I have to give a card.
Yes. Rotzen, which is Ritzei.
How is giving charity? Oh, I'll be seeing awkward if I don't give.
Correct. Absolutely, that's absolutely. It's Ritzonchem. The same idea, 100%. Beautiful. Okay, shkoyach. Have a good Shabbos.